Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. This is your host Subhan, and welcome to the MSA National Official Podcast. Today, I am so humbled and honored to have Dr. Rukhsana Chaudhry. MashaAllah, she's doing amazing work, and we're going to actually be talking about mental health. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. MashaAllah, Dr. Chaudhry is the Director of Mental Health Programming for the American Muslim Health Professionals, AMP. In this role, she has developed several mental health advocacy and educational initiatives, including the Muslim Youth Identity Series, in which American Muslim speakers deliver TED style talks about combating stereotypes and prejudices. She spearheaded and convened the first ever national interfaith anti bullying summit with steering committee partners in December of 2017. Dr. Chaudhry also serves as a senior clinical psychologist and faculty member with the Psychiatric Institute of Washington, a trauma focused institute with a culturally diverse patient population in Washington, D.C. MashaAllah, in 2019, she established the first asylum and human rights clinic in the Department of Professional Psychology in her role as an assistant professor of clinical psychology at the George Washington University. In 2016, she received the Leadership Recognition Award for service in mental health programming by the Muslim Mental Health Conference and Michigan State University Department of Psychiatry. Dr. Chaudhry received her doctorate from George Washington University in 2010. MashaAllah, she also completed her postgraduate training at Harvard University's Global Mental Health Program, specializing in trauma and recovery. Without further ado, as you can see, MashaAllah, Dr. Chaudhry is so well accomplished, and she's the perfect person for us to talk to all of you guys about mental health awareness. So without further ado, Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Chaudhry. How's everything going?
Walaikum salam. Thank you so much, Siobhan, for having me. I'm just really honored to be part of the podcast today and get as much information out there, answer questions, and I've been looking forward to this. So thank you.
Absolutely, of course, and likewise. And I kind of wanted to just start off right off the bat by talking a little bit about mental health. Of course, we'll kind of dive in a little bit deeper into the work you're doing and things of that sort. But I guess just at a broader level, would love to hear your thoughts just about the stigma about mental health in our community. I know
Mhm.
some parents or elders may look at it in different ways. I see a lot more youth talking about it now. Would love to kind of gauge your what the stigma is kind of in today's society, in our Muslim community, of course, with mental health and things like that.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. It's also something that we are working on, daily. So the thing about stigma, when we think about it, is, we've made a little progress, but it is such an ongoing kind of battle, really, for mental health awareness. And I think the important thing to know is, we're always going to, work on it and slowly chip away at reducing stigma. So, stigma currently is, in the Muslim community, it's been something we've been dealing with, in that mental health and mental illness is not really fully understood amongst members of our community. And a lot of times when it comes down to just the family of somebody who has a mental illness or mental health issue, what we're dealing with really is, when it comes down to a smaller group and then larger, is that people kind of shame others at times for having a mental health disorder. And it's not always directly shaming, it's just the sense that something is really wrong with you when you have a mental health concern or disorder. That's really the nature of stigma. And then what happens is that prevents people from getting treatment or looking out for other people who have mental health issues, or finding the right place to go, because the sense of really kind of shame, embarrassment, feeling that you are alone in what you're suffering, that gets you to a place of not reaching out. And that's really what the process of stigma looks like. And also just a lack of understanding, I think, in the community. We're still in a place where we really need to do the hard work on this. We need to do the hard work with for young people, and we need to do the hard work for our elders to understand what this is and how this is a part of every person's experience.
Absolutely.
And we've made some inroads, as you mentioned. I just wanted to add,
Yeah,
and
please do.
yeah, we've made some inroads. So recently we've understood that suicide is a highly urgent concern in our community, and a lot of research is turning the tide, I think, for people to pay attention in our community, but we have to follow that through. So that's where we are in the prop of where we are with the issue of stigma.
Awesome. Got it. Thank you. And inshallah, I want to go even deeper. So I guess, we can break this down into what's being done, what can others do. I'd love to just start off by kind of asking, what is actually being done to address some of these stigmas and just mental health in our community. What's AMP doing? I remember hearing something about a first aid kit, things of that sort.
Mhm.
Would love to hear, what is some of the work that's actually being done in the community to kind of help aid toward this awareness and things like that.
Sure. I'll highlight, a few organizations that are doing awesome work, really. Khalil Center out of Chicago is an excellent organization that provides direct clinical services to low income individuals all the way up to anyone who really just is looking for treatment, couples, families. They do a considerable amount from the Muslim community and are really well known out there for their hard work in that area. And I think more organizations are really in putting mental health into their, major thrust of public health issues and how to kind of tackle mental health as a public health issue, which is really what we need to be aware of. We're looking at, overall, and something I'll talk about with AMP is that we look at mental health as really in tandem with the public health crisis, even with COVID and the pandemic. So we look at it one area that it needs and requires as much attention. So we know this because of all the warnings that have been put out there, especially recently, the Surgeon General's report on mental health being really at an epidemic level in this country. So that doesn't, we're not immune from that as Muslims, right? And the research has shown, and this is really incredible work done by the Stanford Lab for Muslim Mental Health by Rania Awad runs. And she talks in her research and has found that this is a number one area of concern for Muslims where it comes to suicide and mental health issues. So the overlapping of mental health and suicide is an area that we need to currently address. And they've found that as the really leading issue amongst other religious groups, right? So religious folks, so other, than all the other religions. So we're looking at that as Muslims as the most important issue. So we found this through our different, research. And then, of course, there's other organizations really doing the advocacy and awareness work, and Muslim Wellness Foundation does that. And so in AMP's work, our work is to kind of take what our partners are doing and utilize that to really think of innovative approaches to mental health. We're not directly delivering services, but what we have worked with the National Council on Behavioral Health is the mental health first aid movement. And this movement is really about getting and at the reduction of stigma. And how you do that is not by putting out the need for others to become licensed professionals and become counselors themselves only. It's really to become mental health literate. How do we do that? We go out into our communities and we teach them the tools to recognize what mental health disorders look like, how people are asking for help or calling out for help, how to know when people are in crisis, and what to do. So I get calls outside of my practice and teaching areas from friends and relatives of individuals they know that are in crisis, and they themselves who are helping the friend or relative do not know what to do. So mental health first aid steps in there. And that's in order to everyone to become an agent of mental health, mental health literacy, become an agent of change and empowerment when it comes to mental health. So we've partnered with the organization to deliver these trainings across the country. We've had tremendous success. We've done many across the country, and we just feel that this is our real work to reduce stigma, then kind of help those folks get to treatment where they can through our other organizations so that we partner with. So that's a kind of, sum up of where, what people are doing. There's also tremendous toolkits that the Family and Youth Institute put out on bullying, suicide prevention, how to recognize the signs of depression. And this is all for the Muslim community and geared towards that. So there's a lot out there that we can look at.
No, no, I appreciate that. That was super, super helpful. And of course, later at in the podcast, we'll kind of dive even deeper, like how can students get involved and things like
Yeah.
that. But you mentioned a word that I want to kind of touch a little bit more upon, and you mentioned the word depression, right? I know you
Mhm.
mentioned suicide multiple times, and then of course we know that there are other avenues in which depression can lead to, whether it's addiction or it's just deeper depression, suicide, things of that sort. Clearly, this is something that is very, very big in our community, and our students in college and alumni, etc., even younger, honestly, are all dealing with this, or many of them are dealing with this, or we know someone who may be dealing with this. My question is, based on what you've seen, the community you've spoken to, etc., what are some of the biggest factors that are catering toward this depression that many of us are going through? Is it social media, COVID, school, the influencer culture? What have
Mhm.
you seen? What would you, yeah, would love your insight on that.
So yeah, so first I want to answer your question about how depression might, what that might look like and how that might connect to to suicidal issues and concerns. Is that the first part?
Sure, yeah. So I guess
Okay.
we can talk about the depression leading to suicide, and then maybe depression leading toward things other than suicide, and what some of those causes may be.
Sure, sure. Okay, so one thing to know about depression, and we hear the term a lot, is that it doesn't always include suicidal, thinking or what we call ideation and thoughts, and tendencies to think about suicide. Depression can look like a lot of things, but there are some markers we know that, for instance, sadness and depressed mood for many days to weeks at a time during a month, for example, or over the course of 2 weeks. There's also just kind of that real dip in motivation to really be a part of what you were a part of before or carry out your normal duties such as work and school, and how that's changed, and if it's significant. And usually it's not directly caused by an event, but sometimes losses in your life can really move you into a depression as well. And a lot of people are suffering those in the last 2 years. So that's important to note how your mood and overall experience daily has changed. There's also a lot of other things that have to do with how you think, difficulty making decisions, and that are really a chronic problem and not able to kind of move forward on those things, and concentration and focus gets affected considerably. So there's a lot of markers of it. And the best thing to know is that you can get evaluated to see, am I dealing with a depressive experience or episode? Sometimes it includes the suicidal piece. So, but it's important to know that not everybody has suicidal ideation, and not everyone with suicidal ideation may necessarily have the markers of depression before. So that's why suicidal ideation and suicide is really important to understand. There are sometimes many crises that line up in a person's life that have not been dealt with over time. Could be losses, could be extreme stress and strain on you, your family, could be feeling that you have no options left, in your own life and crossroads wherever you are. And it gets to a point where those lack of options become so deep into your own mental experience that you really begin to think about possible suicidal thoughts, or you have suicidal feelings of just wanting things to end pain. That's how suicide looks at times, suicidal ideation. So you may not have all that other preceding part, it may include it, but sometimes this is something that people maybe have a long time of pain and just feeling that they're experience in life is not what they imagined it to be. And, they have a lot of stresses on other ends, stressors in other ends of their life, and it might result in those types of thoughts. So that's important to know. But one thing to know too, it's May, it's Mental Health Awareness Month, and Asian American, you know, um, just recognition of Asian American issues in mental health as well is important this month. So what we found too through research is that you know Asian Americans are their leading cause of death, young people, is suicide. So, and it's between a certain age, it goes up to the age of about 23. But the idea is that this is so critical to understand and what the causes are. So we can say that some of it is related to social media, and absolutely the technology that has infiltrated young people's lives has a tremendous factor when it comes to stress. They found this through research. The tech companies themselves have done their own research to absolutely demonstrate that the social media and technology influences that have to do with the engagement around users and how they receive information about their sense that reflect their sense of self in some way, or has a connection to their self-esteem, has a significant stress component to it, and impacts self-esteem for the time being, at least while they are using the social media tools. The Surgeon General also included this in his report, so you can find that, as you dig more into this, you're thinking about yourself or others. But there's other components when it comes to being a Muslim, when it comes to being an Asian American, which we have to really be aware of, and that is this long-term standing and history that we have with dealing with the issue of discrimination as a religious group, as a racial group, and how that chronicity of racial discrimination and experience adds up in your life experience. So, and it's systemic. So we know that part of it is you might have a really strong community and family members that really support you through the stresses of this, but not everybody has that. And so when you are an immigrant, a refugee, or you have very little social support, and you're just really experiencing a lot of that, stress related to being of a religious minority, or being a racial minority, or you're experiencing the fact that systemically there's tremendous messaging out there that does affect you as an individual and in your identity, in otherizing, the Asian American as well. That adds up to considerable stress, and that really does impact mental health over time. And it's sort of invisible because we're still working to demonstrate how those systemic issues impact us. So they've also found that, of course, post 9/11 with the American Muslim community, that there has been such a rise in mental health issues in our community it's been found that from that time, the experience of discrimination rose at the same levels, and that those levels were connected to significant mental health changes for the community, individual members, family experience. And over time, now we see results of a lot of research and surveys saying that we have significant mental health concerns in our community that we need to address. So it really is multiply pronged. And it is true that this generation is really in a place of dealing with all of the stress, from the different areas that I've outlined.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you once again for shedding so much light. Now, after you mentioned all that, especially, you've been talking about stress, just kind of putting myself back as to when I was a student and, speaking to some of the students on this podcast, some of the, in addition to like, or some of the factors that have caused depression, especially or stress, if you will, as a student, that I can think of, and of some that shared with me, is pressure, expectations,
Mm,
burnout. We just finished finals week, and I know, there's a lot of pressure, expectations, anxiety, and things of that sort. Just being a student and kind of living up to some of the expectations that have been put on them by whether it's parents or just society or even
mhm.
peers.
Yeah,
My question is, and this is for this, but just overall, and just in terms of one's mental health in general, a student may be listening to this, going through various different things, or knows someone who's going through various different things. What can a student do to improve their mental health? What are practical pieces of advice you would have for someone just to kind of work on it? Does that mean they have to go to a therapist, go to a doctor? Are there things they can do at home before? Would love your insight on that.
sure. Yeah, when there is a significant impact on mental health and the experience of one's self-esteem, that does relate to sometimes just a sense of crisis when you have significant pressures on um, you as an individual, to reach expectations, and also the feeling that you may not be, and what happens over time that becomes a significant stress. So, I think there's a lot of things that young people can do to, improve their awareness of mental health issues first. And then, just to be aware is an important thing. Sometimes people kind of go the other way where you might practice certain things like a meditation or mindfulness or something, but sometimes the deeper issues aren't being addressed. So one thing to know is how, taking stock of your support group, taking stock of how much you have in your life or who you have that you can reach out to. This is kind of something that everybody can do. Just knowing that you have an individual that you can speak to when you feel an incredible amount of anxiety, or you're feeling that things are really at a crisis level, or there maybe it's not a crisis, maybe it's just incredible pressures and stress in your life that you're having difficulty managing. Who is the one person that you can reach out to? It can be a friend, and it can be a family member, but if it's not, it might even be someone else that you might trust in your circle of people that you interface with. Sometimes it's a teacher, sometimes it's somebody else like that that you've really connected with. So we always want to make sure some people have that. But some of the things that you can also do is just learning a little bit about what are the coping skills and kind of support aspects of your life that you've already integrated. A prayer as a Muslim is incredibly powerful. And I see a lot of Muslim patients who use just prayer and being a part of their community and ummah as like part of their repertoire of skills, but a lot of them don't use it as the only piece. So that's why it's so important to see, do you have other areas that help support you when you're feeling really down, when you're feeling like you're dealing with incredible expectations and stressors. So some people use, they have an adequate exercise regime or something like that, or they have, you know a group of friends that they go to, or they actually take some time for themselves that improves their overall sense of self-care. Self-care has kind of become a buzzword, but I would say look for the non-materialistic views of self-care, right? Because those pieces get built more likely into your life. If that has to do with how are you taking care of your diet, your exercise piece of your life? How are you winding down at the end of the day? Do you wind down? What are the ways that you're doing it? Do you build that into every day, an everyday practice routine? Like if you have significant pressures that day, noticing if you just wind down by avoiding the feelings at the end of the day, find something that allows you to kind of sit with your feelings and be aware of what you're feeling by the end of the day, where you are not overly stressed. So there's a lot of ways to build things in, and the notion of self-care that's not what we're typically hearing these days. And I, as a psychologist, I advocate for those more often. Um, the other things are, sometimes when you have a mental health concern or someone who's had it, this can put stress on you too. You know, when you're a young person, I imagine you're hearing pretty much every day somebody who's having a mental health concern. It may not be yours directly, but it's the fact that the stress of knowing that that individuals you're on, you know, in your, if it's MSA or if it's in your class or if it's a family friend, you know, some of these people's struggles really weigh on you, and sometimes not knowing how to help them is a considerable amount to hold onto your shoulders. So, one of the things is learning how to empower others to talk about mental health. You know, we advocate for mental health first aid, for example, because we know that people can go out and talk about mental health issues and reduce someone else's difficulty in talking about their mental health. So that's kind of how you also kind of check in with yourself, because you're learning a little bit about what others struggle with. You're not necessarily, you know, the person that struggles with it then, but you do learn a lot more along the way to know when you need that break, or if something really impacted your life that you need to kind of pull away from and take some time to regroup. So some of that has to do with how to almost, you know, improve your own mental health and others. Those are some of the ways I would say, you know, really can help young people today.
No, no, this is great. Really, really appreciate this, Dr.
Yeah.
Chaudhry. And I guess I just want to kind of follow up a little bit deeper in regards to the last point you meant, right? So one of my, it's crazy because you don't know the questions I'm going to ask you, but you literally are following the exact time. So what I wanted
Right.
to ask was just in regards to what you just mentioned. So we kind of talked a lot about like what can one person do if they're personally going through, stress, depression, etc. But the second point you mentioned was, I'm sure all of us know individuals who are going through, various things, whether it's anxiety, stress, depression, etc. Of course, having them talking about this and things like that is important. But of course, it does weigh on us as well for the people that we know who are struggling. So,
Yeah.
is there anything else we can do to help them? Is it like, maybe
Yeah.
they might be open to getting help or anything of that sort? Like, what would you advise to someone who knows someone who's struggling, cares about them, empathizes with them, wants to help them, but isn't sure what to do?
I think this is a really important question, and it's something that as a professional in the field and you know, and just working here in this world of mental health is something that I come across at least 2 to 3 times a day. It's hard to imagine, but because really there are people that are in crisis in a lot of ways, you know, that maybe have to do with other issues too, like domestic violence, or they're suffering the experience of trauma or substance abuse in our whole world, and or they have stress related illnesses. So it's when you might for example get a call, somebody maybe wants to harm themselves, or somebody's in crisis and really needs help and we don't know what to do. We think they need to go see somebody or doctor, or they need to go somewhere. What do we do? So the most important thing to think about is, you know, how far are we willing to go for people? You know, even if it's a neighbor, a friend, and someone, you know, that's indirectly linked maybe. You know, one thing to know is a lot of times people in these moments feel incredibly alone. They feel they have gotten to a place where they don't have anybody perhaps to help them or to understand their pain, you know, or whatever crisis it is. So they're ready, perhaps, or not ready to um, get the help. So we step in as a friend or a community member by being that agent to help them see there is a place to go. There are options, right? And that's kind of what we become in that moment, even if you're on the phone. And so the first thing to do is to talk to the person who, if you can, who's maybe feeling like they're not ready for help, but they really need it. They're in a lot of place of they're in a place of a lot of concern. So you want to talk to them about, you know, what does bring them the idea of hope right now? What kinds of things can they think of that can help them get the help they need, right? Or how can you be of assistance to them? So you don't really necessarily have to be the person to help them get to the therapist or to a crisis center, for instance, but you do want to be the person that is simply there for them to listen and to be able to explore what will help you to move to get to a place of hopefulness or get to a place of help. And I can help you do that. I will be a person that can help you, find the right place to go, but also to think about what's left for you that can be a place for you to work on, and to really just think about with them, are there things that you can work on in the next couple weeks? Short-term goals is helpful. What can we look at for the next 3 weeks that can help you get this help that you need, and that you're really expressing that you are there to help them move through the process, or the person that is calling you with the questions to be of assistance to someone else, letting them know that that person really needs someone then, if it's your community member. A lot of times what happens is we're afraid to take that step. Maybe we have a lot on our plate. Maybe the work of being somebody that that is empowering others to get help feels like a tremendous responsibility that we're not ready for. But actually, the responsibility you have is just to be there. And, that is something that we do really do take for granted. And if you need to help somebody get from one place to another, you can do that. Or you can arrange for someone to do that. It's just about how much we feel we can kind of be there for another individual when they're dealing with a mental health concern, and follow up, see how they're doing after, see if there's a possibility of talking to them multiple days, or having someone else be lined up to talk to them on multiple days, like a family member. But it's something that we just have to engage on, and that's the biggest piece to it. And then of course there's other ways to help people, which is doing the research, to see where they can get help. There's also many alliances like NAMI where you can just simply give them the number and follow up, like, hey, did you call that number? I've been thinking about you, like the NAMI helpline and support line, to let me know how it goes. This is just a kind of process of being there for the individual. So that those are examples that I can give.
No, no, thank you, and thank you so much for just answering that question. I think that's something that really impacts myself first and foremost, and I know will impact everybody. Just being present, just being there for somebody. It's definitely something all of us can do,
Mhm.
inshallah. And I guess when people hearing this, and I know so many will be inspired, inshallah, and motivated to not only strive to be there for their loved ones and their friends, etc., but I know many will also want to take even a bigger role for their community, being there for as many
Mhm.
people as they can. So, as we, conclude, I wanted to ask, there will be motivated individuals, inshallah, listening to this. If someone wants to be a part of the great work that you're doing, that AMP is doing, etc., what can they do? How can they be involved? We want to make sure that we, in this podcast, give everybody that opportunity who wants to be involved at that communal level. Uh, they can. So what can they do? Who can we send them to?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I think that the MSA national and all the chapters are just such a great there's such a great possibility to change the narrative around mental health for young people, for even our elders, or young people that have family members that have mental illness, and how much shame comes with that, and how difficult that is when you yourself are somebody who deals with that in your family, but is too feels too embarrassed to really talk about. So the first thing is, have the conversation in your MSAs. Have the conversation about who here has dealt with mental health or mental illness in their families, and who here has felt that difficulty of opening up about that. Begin to just settle in and have one discussion a month about it. But the other piece that AMP is doing, of course, as I mentioned, is the mental health first aid trainings that happen all around the country. I would say if you can sort of nominate one person to work on getting a training set up through AMP and just work on, having as many folks in the MSA trained in mental health. This is an incredibly empowering experience, trained in mental health first aid, because they then will go out and make this a part of their next organization where they move on after college, where they move on to in their work settings. It really does stay with you. So that's how you become that. You really, it's a reciprocal process. You take in the training and then you move forward into other organizations, and more people are likely to, become empowered themselves through whatever information you put out there. So it's something that we have to kind of work on, as like I said, it's ongoing, but that's probably the most important thing MSAs can do now. And that, almost setting like a goal, like as many MSAs as possible across the country becoming trained would be the most optimal thing that could do for the community right now. And I outline it because of the research and the place we're in with mental health for our specific community and Asian Americans overall.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, thank you. We will be sure, inshallah, to make sure we tag AMP and we have the contact information of the department, etc. If one wants to kind of get these
Mhm.
trainings set up and things like that. Well, Dr. Chaudhry, I wanted to give you the floor, inshallah. Do you have any closing remarks or anything like that, inshallah, before we conclude?
Um, I think I just really appreciate the ability to talk to MSA National and just be a part of the conversation. And, I think anyone who's kind of dealing with mental health issues in their family or they themselves may be listening, um, I think it's important to know that most likely there are places for you to go or for your family member that you don't realize are really there, and a lot of times that happens. A lot of times there's people that deeply would care and be a part of helping you or your family member through it, but we often don't know where to look because we feel that shame around it. So I would encourage all of you to kind of think of the places that you haven't really had this conversation, or think about others that you could talk to about something you might be struggling with, and just think about how that might relate to so many other people that and that, picking out at least one day a month to have the conversation around mental health in your families or your MSA chapters, or in your friends groups. I would just encourage people to do that.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. May Allah reward you. We've really benefited so much from your time today. We're almost done. We do this in every single podcast, so we're going to kind of switch lanes now and just kind of do something a little bit more lighter,
Mhm.
a rapid round of just fun questions, if that's okay,
Mhm.
before we conclude.
Sure.
Awesome, cool. So we're going to go ahead, just 5 questions or so, fun, simple questions. We'll love your answers, your advice, all
Mhm.
that good stuff. So, number one, Dr. Chaudhry, what is your favorite food?
Favorite food is definitely pizza.
Awesome, awesome. Any particular one by chance?
Well, I'm from New Jersey originally, so I'm just biased towards any pizza that I've had in North Jersey. So
Okay, cool.
I have some favorite spots,
Got it. Pizza. Cool. What about your favorite hobby?
Favorite hobby is definitely anything music oriented. So, definitely like live music, but a lot of times I'm really into, like I'm Pakistani by my, background. So I love Qawwali. I love listening to live Qawwali, and I also love indie rock. So I have like a whole various experience with music. So, but that's just, so anything music oriented.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Next question. What is your favorite book?
Oh man, that's a hard one. Um, I have been reading a lot with my 7-year-old. So like he reads everything. So I would say, but you know what? I've been reading with them since they were little, and there's just my favorite all-time kids book, and it's Where the Wild Things Are by Maurice Sendak.
Oh,
And it's just like super. imaginative, but also like really deep at the same time.
Got it. Got it. Very cool. Awesome. So almost done. Two questions left. Where is your favorite place to travel? Maybe you've traveled, you want to go there, but your bucket list travel place.
Ah, so it would have to be somewhere I haven't really been, I would think. I mean, yeah, bucket list, travel. Um, it's that's so tough, because there's so many places I haven't been.
Yeah.
Um, I I think I would love to go to uh, it's between two. So I have not been to Japan yet. Love to go to Japan. And I would love to go to Nepal.
Very cool.
So I have to feel like that's a tie.
Okay, cool. Top two. Love it. Now it's time for my favorite question. I ask this in every single podcast, and I would really love your advice as we conclude. What is the biggest advice you would give to your younger self?
Um, I think the biggest advice would be, take more risks that are, that you, when you're afraid of something, take it as a challenge and don't be afraid of taking a risk that you might have thought you couldn't do, or, you were maybe too afraid to do. So yeah, I would say that, don't be afraid of taking risks that are for your betterment.
I love it. I love it. That is deep, and that's a beautiful way to conclude. Inshallah.
Yeah.
Well, may Allah reward you, Dr. Chaudhry. We've all benefited so much, myself first and foremost, from this awesome, needed discussion. Inshallah. For anyone who's listening and wants to get involved, we will be sure to link all the contact information and tag app and everything, so you can get training set up in your own MSA. Inshallah. And without further ado, we wanted to thank all of you for watching and listening and being a part of the MSA National Podcast, inshallah. And we will see each and every single one of you on the next episode of the MSA National Podcast. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.